Hello, and welcome to the Multicultural Arts Center. Please note the 3 exits in the room: the way you came in, the door on the opposite side of the theater, and the stairs down to the lobby. In the event of an emergency, please proceed to the closest exit. Please silence your cell phone and refrain from flash photography during the performance. Thank you for attending today's event, and please consider making a donation to support us in continuing this work. Enjoy the show.
Hello all, my name is Elise Patterson, founder, executive, and artistic director of Abilities Dance Boston. Welcome to Intersections V5. We're so thrilled to have you. In the era of attention economy, we're happy that you could spend your time and dollars with us today. As an access note for those in-house, there are QR codes with stream text links so you can access captions on your device. There's also ASL, and there will also be audio descriptions, which, if you're new to our work, are words that explain movement to blind, low vision audiences. If this is your first time, you're in for a treat. Intersections is a special series that honors BIPOC and deaf disabled honorees, past and present. This series was created when I felt that racial equity spaces could be quite ableist, and disabled spaces could be quite white. And for those of us at the intersections, we can feel stuck and not sure where we can belong. So this space honors those who live at those multiply marginalized intersections to show we're not alone. There are so many people in Massachusetts and beyond that have, are, and will continue to do incredible work at intersections of arts, advocacy, and more. For those who don't identify, it shares ancestral and living history of the work, and to encourage you to keep disability history curriculum going in your classrooms, workspaces, homes, and overall community. On our company's website, abilitiesdanceboston.org/events/ADB26 intersections, we'll have links to our program, both Word and PDF versions, and legislative agendas of all of our advocacy partners. Additionally, under the company page are the bios of our artists tonight. A special shout out to Andrew Cho's archival music, which was repurposed and thoughtfully curated to meet the rhythms of our movement. Additionally, thank you to Derek Keepley for being our very first rehearsal director to be in rehearsals when I couldn't and ensure that dancers had what they needed to succeed. Thank you to our honorees: Baina, Claudia, Cassandra, and our ancestor Tom. You will hear from our living honorees directly through videos. It was a lot of work to cut down hours of conversations into 15 minutes, but I hope you are filled with their experiences and knowledge and follow their work as well. I also wanted to thank Berkeley's Institute for Accessible Arts Education for providing ushers and someone to click through our videos. It's not me this year. They also provided a great intern, Leo, who reached out to schools and community groups to share the word of the work. It's their first external engagement of providing students to support, and we're happy to be their first, but definitely not last, external partner. We appreciate continuing to develop skills and further train the future disabled and diverse workforce. As part of our work, our company has the optional opportunity to reach out to senators and representatives across Massachusetts to educate them on the bill priorities from our advocacy partners. Our advocacy partners, Boston Center for Independent Living and Disability Policy Consortium, were unable to make it. However, we did get a video from Mass Trans Political Coalition, which will play now.
Hi, I'm Finn Gardner, and I am the Director of Advocacy and Organizing at the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition. I was really honored to be spotlighted for my advocacy work last year, especially in the innovative way that ability stances created through intersections. I was thrilled to see how my more abstract policy and advocacy work was translated into kinetic movements and vibrant music, and I'm glad to see that tradition continue with this year's honorees. MTPC is working on three priority bills this year. The first bill is an act establishing a commission on the status of transgender people, which would create a 20-person commission to promote the advancement, safety, and inclusion of trans people across the Commonwealth. Although we have many laws in place that protect trans people from discrimination, trans people still face unacceptable discrimination and harassment in daily life. We hear countless stories about people who have faced adversity because of their gender identity or expression. This commission would help combat that discrimination and conduct research into the experiences and needs of trans people. This bill is currently with the Senate Ways and Means Committee. The second bill is an act relative to trans-inclusive healthcare access. This bill would remove administrative barriers to people receiving gender-affirming care, such as arbitrary expiration dates for eligibility letters from mental health providers, or requirements to have letters from 2 mental health providers instead of the recommended 1 to receive gender-affirming surgeries. This bill is also with the Senate Ways and Means Committee. The last bill we're supporting is an act to promote rehabilitation, including guaranteed health, treatment, and safety for incarcerated LGBTQI+ people. When federal regulations protecting LGBTQI+ people are being withdrawn, and when LGBTQI+ people are at high risk for discrimination, physical violence, sexual abuse, and harassment, it's crucial that there be ways to protect this population. This bill would add an LGBTQI+ coordinator to each state correctional facility, ensuring that LGBTQI+ people have safe housing, coordinate education, employment, and program placement, help people organize support groups, and ensure that HIV and LGBTQ+ publications are available for people to read. It would also prevent LGBTQI+ people, or those perceived as being LGBTQI+, from being housed with people who express homophobic or transphobic views. On top of that, incarcerated people with a diagnosis of gender dysphoria will be housed in a single occupancy cell if the facility is at an occupancy of 90% or lower. Prisons will also be barred from placing people in restrictive housing or removing them from the general population for being LGBTQI+, though people can still request to be in solitary confinement for their own safety. This bill is with the House Healthcare Financing Committee. I strongly encourage you to reach out to the heads of these committees and ask them to pass these bills. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the importance of acknowledging the intersections of disability and race. As a Black disabled person, I know intimately how these phenomena are connected. I don't just experience racism in a vacuum, it's also layered with ableism. I'm glad that Intersections highlighted my experiences last year, and I look forward to seeing what they'll do tonight with this group of honorees. Thank you.
And we're back to more remarks. No? Remarks. Thank you. Access and action. Additionally, we also have someone from Partners in Democracy to share a few words about their bills.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Green. It's really great to be here. My brother's disabled, and my mom has been working in disability her whole life, and so this really means a lot. And I'm really excited to tell you about democracy, which I've been working in for quite a while, and how we can make it more accessible to all of us. I'm with Partners in Democracy. I'm here with my colleague Daisy, and we are outside the table if you want to talk more to us. But essentially, we are supporting a couple of bills. One is H800, and that would be to provide cities and towns with the funding they need to make polling places more accessible for all of us. And then the other is S504, which is intended to require the Secretary of State's office to sort of monitor, check in with polling locations and make sure that they are actually accessible as the law requires. So would really encourage you to contact your state reps about those. I also want to let you know that with the November election coming up, there are some ballot initiatives that pertain to democracy that we're fully supporting. And those are to do with same-day, election day voter registration, which is also kind of an accessibility issue. People being able to walk in on election day and register so they can actually vote. All-party primaries to make voting more inclusive for everyone, expanding public records laws so that folks can access records from the legislature and governor's offices, as is common in most states, and finally legislative stipend reform so that we can have transparency in the ways in which our legislators are paid. So if you want to talk about any of that with us, sign up with us to volunteer or for our mailing list. We'd love to continue that conversation at intermission. In the meantime, very much looking forward to this performance. Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to report that not only do these reps support our work, but Representative Lindy Sabadosa supports all of the bills recommended. Representative Danilo Sena co-sponsors a bill to establish ranked choice voting. And on our website's event page, under the legislative agenda, are all of the bills across these partners that are up on the state floor. It also lists certain legislators that are already sponsoring these bills. I hope you're inspired to learn and reach out to your local legislators in Massachusetts to get these passed, and thanks to those that are already supporting these important bills. I wanted to thank Cambridge Arts Council for partially supporting this work through their social justice grant. I also want to shout out our organizational and programmatic supporters, which you can find in your program. However, as we know, needs are constantly increasing, and we want to be able to keep up with as equitable as possible wages to keep our disabled and diverse workforce going strong through this series and for the rest of the season. In person, there are QR codes where you can donate to our campaign to help offset the cost of the production, as well as help offset the cost year-round through our general donating platform. And it'll also be provided in the link on our live stream as well. We're going to need to rely on our community more than ever if we're going to make it through these fascist times. So please, do support however you can. And if you're not able to give monetarily, but you can give your time, let us know, because we do have plenty of volunteer needs in our organization. It truly takes a village. We have a small part-time and full-time team of admin workers, as well as a really engaged but still small board. We could use some more support to keep this work going. They're great and truly could not do as much without them, but it takes even more. So thank you to our team, and let's figure out how to grow it together sustainably and keep providing the essential high-quality programming that you all deserve. A couple of important tabling notes for those in the room. We have information if you're looking to join our board. We'd love for you to talk to a board member and learn more about how to govern this rapidly growing organization. Additionally, we do have merch. Merch is for sale. Fun t-shirts, new journals, and stickers. And if you're online and interested in ordering, email abilitystancepboston@gmail.com, and we'll share pics and see how we can get it to you. Additionally, we do have a banner for those in the room. It says before because it was last year's, and I truly regret not just saying intersections so we can keep using it since it tripled in 6 months. But you'll know that I am using our dollars wisely. So we're also gathering audience feedback on videos so that we can share how these pieces resonate with you, as well as ways that ADV has supported your understanding of living disability history and culture. And also feel free to reach out to any of our staff to share feedback on how we can improve your experience to the best of our abilities. You can also email abilitystancepboston@gmail for further reflections. In your programs and further sharing, we have upcoming performances this year. We have a big premiere of our Firebird Part 2 ballet, Juneteenth weekend. It features animation, aerial silks, and more. Event information is on our website, and tickets are live at ticketstripe.com/ADVFirebird2. Save the date, because it'll also be restaged September 18th through 20th at the Strand Theater in Dorchester. And then that will take us into intersections V6, May 30th, and April 1st, 2027. I'm giving you these dates now. Put them in your calendar, and you can never say I didn't give you enough time to plan accordingly. With that said, thank you again, and let's enjoy the show. And we'll ask for the light to shine on our interpreter.
Abilities Dance Boston presents Dr. Bayina Muhammad.
Hi, I'm Baina Muhammad. I use she, her pronouns. I am originally from New Jersey, from Patterson, New Jersey. I currently reside in Durham, North Carolina. I am a mother of four sons, two of whom live with autism and other co occurring conditions. I also identify as a disabled mother, and I am Muslim. That identity is very important to me as well. And I currently run the North Carolina Black Disabilities Network as the founder and executive director. And I'm also a professor of history at North Carolina Central University. And there I teach courses on African American history, African diaspora, Black women specifically, and as of recent, courses on Blackness and disability in the South. I was born in 1972. So technically, I was born into the Nation of Islam, but I grew up as an Orthodox Muslim. And but the message of Black liberation was one that my parents emphasized in the house. It was one that grounded the way I saw myself as a Black person and as a Muslim. And it still informs the way I think about myself in the world today. Now, my formal education also helps to ground my understanding of racial identity as well. And I recognize my connection not only to Black people in the US, but Black people in other parts of the world, Africa, and the broader diaspora. So my parents certainly were foundational in helping me to develop a positive racial identity. And then the schooling that I gained also helped to ground that as well. Many of the teachers there were instrumental in sort of pushing me to think beyond my current environment and to ask those critical questions and to think about some of the answers to the questions, you know. Now, not everybody enjoyed Baina and all of her her questions. Back then, I was deemed a radical. I had lots of questions and ideas about how things should be. Strong, um, a strong emphasis on justice. I just, as a kid, I had that. And partly, I think, because of the kind of household I grew up in, and then certainly the other experiences that I had outside the home that helped to shape that.
It's important how these educational spaces can really kind of provide the framework for which you then critique and examine life in. Um, I also wanted to go back a bit to when you were mentioning about Patty and you said you were kind of a little sister in a way, and it seems like you were very close throughout childhood. Were there specific maybe games you played or things you did together to kind of connect in that way, especially since you mentioned that that was kind of your first understandings of different disabilities and the environments in which that can oppress or liberate.
Right. Patty, we did quite a lot together. She was a member of our family, so we celebrated birthdays and we would bake cakes together. We would go to the park together. She came to all of our family gatherings. Um, and Patty remained in our life beyond when I left for uh, graduate school. My mother was able to find her a family that adopted her, and it totally changed her life trajectory. She lived in a home and she was able to work and make decisions for herself that she would never have been able to make living inside the institution. And so I got to see her blossom, as a young adult woman, where I didn't witness that when she was just coming home to visit us. It was quite clear that the environment was stifling in terms of helping her to develop socially, and I'm sure she felt like she wasn't cared for when she lived there. But she was definitely an integral part of our family. I have photographs of us together um, during her birthdays because I used to enjoy baking, and so everybody's birthday, I would typically bake a cake for them, and Patty was no exception. My mother worked as a laundress for North Jersey Developmental Center, and while working there, she had a strong interest in wanting to help uh, members of that community leave the facility because she saw that it was quite repressive. And there was one young woman who had an intellectual disability. Her name was Patty, and my mother grew very close to Patty and really wanted to adopt her to live with our family permanently. But because we were poor working class, they were denied an opportunity to adopt Patty. But Patty spent weekends with us. And as such, I was assigned to her as like her little sister, and just kind of acclimating her to the community beyond where she stayed in the institution. And that experience was really my first um, experience of thinking about disability without much conversation about it. Like my mother, the only thing she would say to us was that humanity um, is a spectrum experience, and that every human life is worthy. And so she would talk to us about the um, people who lived at the facility with an understanding that we were not supposed to see them as deficient because they were different. You know what I mean? And so with Patty, it that relationship allowed me to develop a more closer connection with um, a disabled person. And my disability wasn't identified until I was an adult, and so that was not a framework that I had come to understand at that point in my life, but I grew very curious about what it meant for Patty to be disabled in the world that we lived in. As a child, I could tell how people treated her differently, and her communication um, was limited in that she never expressed to me how it made her feel to navigate the world as a disabled person. But it certainly made me curious. And then when I became an aunt in my late teens, early adulthood, my firstborn niece was born with cerebral palsy and some other co occurring conditions that changed her life trajectory in terms of the medical conditions that she dealt with. And at that time, I was going away to college. And so I was beginning to develop a more sophisticated understanding about what it means to be disabled and Black. And one of the things that stood out for me during that time was watching my brother and her mother navigate systems that impeded her ability to have really good health, quality of care, access to resources that were so important for her. And I began to recognize the systemic barriers that exist when it comes to the disabled experience, and that um, overlap or interconnection with the racialized experience of being Black certainly made me more aware and um, was the beginning to my development of a disabled identity. But then becoming a mother of my firstborn son in 1997 was the the final catalyst that really brought me into a greater awareness about what it means to be disabled and Black. And that's where I got most of my academic training. And oftentimes, as a Black mother, we, through our experience of mothering, it serves as a catalyst for the type of activism that we eventually become involved with. And that's exactly what happened with my oldest son. It put me on a different trajectory to want to not only understand the experience, but gain the knowledge so that I could help to disrupt systems that were clearly operating against his success and the success of other Black children and families. So that, it was 20 years prior, but certainly that was the turning point in my life to become more engaged with the experience of disability. It was the first conference on race and disability in the Southeast. And in the conference, we brought together stakeholders, people with lived experiences, and communities to talk about a host of uh, um, um, topics that are important. And at the center of that was the first person account of young disabled adults. Like, I didn't want anybody speaking for them. We had them on a panel talking for themselves about what their experiences have been, what things they would like to see for themselves in community moving forward, and then also the parent experience. Because with Black communities in particular, that relationship is symbiotic. It's not, people just kind of leave and go off on their own. It's very important to stay connected to family and extended community. And so I didn't want to deal with it in sort of this siloed way. I wanted it to be more integrative in terms of how we approach talking about some of these major topics. And then also professionals. Like, I don't, in my experience, they have not been oriented around thinking about people as members of community. They think about, the conditions that they're helping to address, but not that this is a whole person who has a life. They have whatever the developmental or medical condition is, and they are also whole human beings. And how can we begin to interrogate these different disciplines to think about that component and to be in conversation with one another? So it was very fruitful to do that.
For me when talking to you. This kind of imagery around water for me was coming up around kind of the fluidity of which you talked through not just your academic work, but your own life journey and lived experience, as well as being able to kind of how water can kind of over time reform stone, which is, I think, what this work is. Not just legislative, but kind of community practices that folks are experiencing when they're thinking about the intersections of Blackness and disability. So I'll pause there and see how you vibe with that.
I love that. I didn't even share with you that water is a part of my meditative practice. I keep fountains everywhere in my campus office, my home office, everywhere in my living space. It is so important for me to listen to the sound of water and to be reminded of how water reflects the fluidity that exists in our lives, and when there is no fluidity, how it can impact us. So it just reminds me to kind of learn to go with the flow and to accept things as they are. So wow, that you use that as a way to think about how to tell my story is incredible. I didn't say anything about water, right?
No, but I'm glad we're connected, you know?
You're
I like
so
this. I like
connected.
this.
Wow. Yeah. And I would say that being diagnosed neurodivergent as an adult for me was eye opening, even though I had a lot of knowledge, but to pair that knowledge with my own experience was liberating for me because I it answered questions about why I saw the world and experienced the world the way I did. Especially as a little girl, it made me reflect on little Baina and the things that um, I experienced that didn't have words to share, with anybody. But it also helps me to understand why I felt a deep connection with Patty as a child. I didn't know, but I felt something. So, in allowing my reflections on my earlier experiences also informs the way I parent, the way I am in community with other parents and with individuals, learning more about their experiences and the way that they want to be in the world and have the appropriate supports to be um, successful in however way they define that. So I'm a lot more attuned than I was, some years ago when I was a student studying.
Left to right, Izzy, Blake, and Tori in a triangle, transforming physical space to elevate consciousness. They look at their right hand as it starts to ripple. The fluidity of healing that grounds Baina is flowing through these dancers. The fluidity of Baina's religious, academic, and communal practices intertwine as the fluidity continues building in dancers' bodies. They deeply bend as right arm reaches right, and largely circles around and overhead, welcoming us into this communal experience. Right arm and leg reach right, which leads them into a turn. As if holding a bowl and mixing cake batter for her sister in spirit, Patty, who was at a developmental center where her mother worked, stirring together different notions of what family meant and advocating for disabled lives before the wording was realized. Right leg kicks over to lunge facing left. Body ripples as more disabled people come into her family and let their experiences guide her work. Right leg rises and lowers as torso lowers and bends. Realizing that not all folks in institutions are treated fairly, as her mother and she works to find families for her extended family, especially if the space is like JRC where electroshock happens to this day and needs to be banned. Arms crossed as torso rises and falls, feeling the weight of that as well as the love shared in their interconnected family. Crossed arms push front and side, as if trying to push the love in their advocacy forward. They pirouette and face left. Arms opening and closing, as if mixing Baina's spiritual Islamic identity with her emerging understanding of disabled community. Dancers step on their toes across the space, Blake's crutches tapping, Izzy and Tori's arms curved, opening and closing as a strong racial identity emerges. Her parents emphasized Black liberation as former Nation of Islam members, but which continues to inform her practice today. Izzy skips side to side with arms at side. Tori joins them. Blake joins them. Right foot points to left knee as arms alternate, curving up and in. Foot lowers as they face left. Feet grinding into the floor as they focus on hands, considering the intersections of racialized experiences and disabled experiences when she struggled to get her niece with CP adequate health care. It feels like anti-discrimination in healthcare for disabled folks are passed, Baina's family could have a better quality of life. Dancers embrace that notion as legs kick in, trying to push their work forward. Their triangle tightens as they move closer to the center, arms and crutches exploring the possibility of how there's limited knowledge of Black and disabled experience, especially in North Carolina. They spin with one leg out like a pencil compass, finding their path to where they can do the most good. Leg and arm rise as left foot grinds into the floor against the barrier she faced as a mother of a disabled son. Arms swing up and over as it led her to pursue higher education to really delve into the systemic barriers of racism and ableism. She stretches herself to fit into these spaces that were never meant for us. Figuring out ways to disrupt these systems. Hands rise and lead them to face back. They skip right to left. Hands rise to face front. Like balancing the various identities one must in academia, the stretching as well as being a mother of Black disabled children led to a later in life diagnosis for herself. Dancers lift legs and sway through mixed living experience and communal experience. Torso lowers as arms stretch at sides. They lift on their toes and step daintily backwards as they take the tools of academia and use it to support the Black and disabled community. Torso lowers. They rise and continue stepping back, hands flourishing to find ways to flourish in tight academic spaces, to not just study about our experiences, but teach them to others. They repeat like Baina, using her space to discuss the intricacies of the Black and disabled lived experiences, ensuring students digest that information as hands flow down neck and torso. They skip side to side like Baina, skipping across standard curriculum and discussing institutionalization of Black folks in Reconstruction, discrimination in healthcare today, and more. They push down any doubt that this work isn't impactful. They push down lack of resources for Black and disabled community like Baina founding North Carolina Black Disabled Network. Arms opening beyond the ivory tower and into the community. Connecting Black disabled people and their family with education and resources to improve their lived experience and build community in an area where disability isn't as prioritized in Massachusetts, and that's really saying something. Dancers flow across the stage as they revel in resources and knowledge that Baina has shared. The triangle reconfigures as Blake is at the front and Tori and Izzy are behind at the sides. While Blake slides crutches to the right, Tori spins Izzy in an arabesque. As Blake kicks backwards, Izzy spins Tori into an arabesque. They release as they hold hands and skip to the front, torsos rippling in a lunge. They make a large spin with arms circling overhead. Izzy then spins towards Blake as they're back to back. Outer arms rising as Tori alternates bringing foot to alternate knee and rising arms and torso up. Blake and Izzy face each other with arms and crutches crossed and looking up. Side to side, their torsos ripple and lean as they are interconnected like Baina's working community. Tori continues to carve her body through space as she ripples, representing the steadiness and the flow of Baina's direction in life, continually reaching to learn more. Izzy and Blake's arms circle outward as they release. Izzy moving forward as they continue to reach for community support, like how issues accessing ride and rideshare with service animals affect young disabled folks' employment in Massachusetts and North Carolina. All dancers skip side to side. Blake and Tori's arms overlap, like how community provides each other rides and advocates for better public transit. Feet switch as they lunge. Outer arms circle up and over as Tori bends behind Blake. Blake leans on Tori as their arms and crutches stretch, highlighting the lengths we can go when we have the support we need. They release as Tori faces away from Blake. Izzy, who's been grounded on the floor, rises more replenished to continue this advocacy work. Izzy body flails for left arm rising up and spin. Blake and Tori jump as they switch, feet in and out, like the continual barriers we hop through to get the resources needed. Legs continue to bend and stretch behind them as all dancers release notions of separating identities. Diane understands her disability, motherhood, academic work, and community work all inform a sense of self and sense of community care. As dancers continue reaching and lunging for more, with feet turned out, they slightly bend as arms wave. Embracing fluidity again throughout this process. Curved arms rise, and right foot points to left knee, and right then left hand flourishes down. They double pirouette. Arms reaching up and over as they circle back in time, with Baina making cakes with Patty. She wouldn't know then that that deep relationship would help transform her professional and personal life. Hands alternate crossing as they step back. Legs jump side to side. Arms open up as we embrace her sons and family that guide her journey. Curved arms rise and fall. They open to side and fall. One arm opens to side and other up and falls. The continued exploration of arms curving and straightening and falling within space mirrors the patterns of Baina both giving to herself and giving to community. The different patterns that interdependency creates can be fascinating to watch. Izzy takes a moment to stretch out and lunge and resume the pattern. Tori follows, taking a moment. And then Blake. All continuing this pattern that can at times feel restrictive like academia, but also necessary to have systems to thrive. All dancers sweep side to side as one arm curves in and the other extends. They spin and then lunge, scooping arms, continually curious, continually rooted in family and community, continually fluid like water.
Abilities Dance Boston presents Claudia Alick.
Claudia Alec, gender pronouns they, them, she, her. And you asked just identifiers, like large identifiers. I identify. as being born and raised as a woman, and I also identify as being non binary, like as a person. I identify as a Black person. I also identify as somebody who has Indigenous ancestry and relationship, but in a complicated way. I do not identify as indigenous because that is a kind of a fraught identity to claim in the United States. I identify as disabled. I definitely identify as disabled, and I identify under a multiple of different disabilities. But I find disabled is just the best overall term for that. I identify as a producer. I identify as a national leader. I identify, interestingly enough, I do not identify as an activist, even though many people will identify my work under that label. But I would, identify as a person who is greatly civically engaged in the public performance of making justice. I identify as an artist. I often just call myself a cultural producer because I have so many different types of performance and art that I do produce. It was very, very racist. I grew up in an incredibly racist, violent, heterosexist, ableist community. So I guess all of America is horrifically racist and heterosexist, but I was primarily talking about Montana.
Got it.
And so I recall the conversation I had where I realized I was Black because someone explicitly told me, I can't be friends with you. Like I went to kindergarten or something, was incredibly popular for a few days because I'm a cute kid. I'm personable. I'm making friends. And apparently, some white parents had conversations with their children to be like, you should not be friends with her. And then those children came to me and were like, yo, I love hanging out with you. But apparently, you're a Black person and I'm a white person, and that's not supposed to be what we're doing. So my one of my earliest memories is learning that that was a thing. My mother was very, very passionate about Black pride and Black culture. So I grew up in a home where if we had a card, back in the day, you tried to buy a card from the store and it was mostly white people on the cards. They hadn't learned to market to Black folks. So my mother would color the faces in. Like she really cared deeply about Black representation, and she was not going to have a weird white dominant imagery in the house. We are a generational Star Trek watching household. Why? Because first Uhura and then Geordi. In terms of Black culture, I was reading, Langston Hughes poetry as a child. What is that? Oh, what is it? Paul Robeson records. Just, a lot of like esoteric, just Black stuff in the house and in the culture. And also, even though I was in Montana, I was performing Black revolutionary stuff. So like I started the first Black student union at my high school. I was adorable, but I was walking around in a beret and a turtleneck. I grew out of that phase. But in many ways, when you grew up in Montana, you had to make the Black culture, right? So like I had to start the Black student union because there had never been one. My mother was disabled, but also growing up in Montana, the Black population was so small, you tended to do collective power with all the marginalized people who were harmed by wider white supremacy culture. So like we were in the space with the Jewish people, with the disabled people, with the gay people, like everybody was coming. It's interesting. I had an intersectional lens before I had language to understand what that meant. I had a coalition philosophy before I recognized that was so vitally important. And it was because it was a small town and we needed numbers. And so we would gather together. My mother was disabled. So that meant that I was learning about disability through that lens. Again, also having friends who had different disabled experiences, but I was a closeted disabled person, right? Where my mother had recognized, okay, you definitely are neuroatypical. Probably would have been, well, no, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have been diagnosed as autistic, even though I am at the time, because I'm gendered female and racialized as Black. So we quickly determined that the system would label me as special needs when I was actually very, very smart and needed to not be tracked, put on that track. So then my mother did a lot of additional labor to help me mask and find hacks, just find hacks for living. So like amusingly, I didn't really come into like understanding you have some disabilities that you're negotiating hardcore until I was like in my early 20s and recognizing, oh, wait a second, other people aren't doing all this extra labor to make this all work. I thought that that's just how it was, but it turns out, no, that's because it's working for me. I helped to make it work for myself. Um, Later on in my life, I became a disability rights advocate. And when I got a job at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, I was this was like one of the first things I did. They asked me come up with the mission for, or like the values or just the mission statement for the work you're producing. And I was like, access is going to be one of the main pieces of what I'm doing. And I'm going to find disabled dancers and I'm going to put them on that stage. And I had like these big, passionate ideas about staging disabled dance. And I was told immediately, that's super cute. That's too ambitious. There's no money for that because obviously that's extra if you want to have something that's nice, So I was like, okay, fine. And I traveled to New York, went to a convention, told my story to like some lady, and she's like, oh my God, we have funding. And that was the New England Foundation for the Arts. And the New England Foundation for the Arts gave me this amazing grant that allowed me to present Axis Dance. And which started my relationship with Alice Shepard, which is where I was able to later on in my career help to develop some of her stuff. But I got this money and started making the stage accessible because you literally couldn't get on it, right? It was not only, it was made out of rotting wood. If I put dancers in wheelchairs on there, they were going to fall through, but also there was no ramps. So we're working on the ramps, doing all that stuff. And then I get a virus that destroys my ability to use my body. So like I have a background in dance as a person who has a able-bodied experience physiologically. So like doing ballet, capoeira, theater dance, as well as other kinds of dance. And then having a very sudden experience of you're able-bodied one day, the next day you can't walk or move your limbs right. And that happened that I had already started the construction on the stage. And I was able to book all my artists confidently. And then when the show started, I was able to get on that stage in my wheelchair because I'd made a ramp. I was quite pleased with myself, even though that was not I didn't know I was going to need it that bad. But that's why you should make everything accessible. You never know. I think I've always been a little ahead of my time. So there was never like me growing up, there wasn't a lot of room for being asexual, being bisexual. Like bisexual was kind of like as broad of an identity as you could have when I was in high school. And I owned it really hard as like, I now realize not only as a real identity, but as a political statement, right? As a high school student, I was doing a lot of dressing like a man. And by the time I got into college, I was doing a lot of, I'm going to be in spaces that let me be in a small pocket of I am performing some maleness, right? Where it's like I'm stuffing my pants. I'm dressing in a specific way. But like it was mostly at lesbian clubs. I look back at it and I'm just like, oh, baby trans, Claudia, so cute. But also I recall realizing that I was not going to be able to succeed in the world when as my lived identity in the careers that I was trying to make for myself. This happened when I was doing HBO's Def Poetry Jam. And I was fully, very strongly in my own identity. So I was wearing like these army pants that I had gotten from a dude. I remember being like, "Oh my god, I could rock those fatigues cuter than you." And he was like, "Yeah." And I put them on, and I did. And he was like, "I guess they're yours now." And that's how I got those. And like that was one of my core outfits. And the ways that they were just aggressively trying to style me, gender me, put me in some kind of performative pocket, I realized, oh, this doesn't work. And so then the next year, when I taped for HBO's Def Poetry Jam, and that's the year I aired, I took notes from my drag queen friends. I had some conversations. We talked about different hairstyles. I remember I went to the place where you can get your nails done. I had never had that, so I got nails. I had my hair big and beautiful, and I wore high heel shoes, and I definitely had my tits up and out. And that was like the energy of that particular, like there's a period of time where I was performing high femininity, but it was definitely borrowed from drag queens. And it worked. I was like, oh, and I received some career success. Today I produced an event called Accessible Virtual Pride. And why did that event manifest? It manifested because I love going to a Pride event. Like I said, I used to help to co-produce a Pride event for years. But the Pride events were not accessible with COVID protections. And so when the world opened back up, I couldn't go out there, and a lot of my friends couldn't, and we were mourning. We were complaining, actually. We were talking about it, and oftentimes online, if I see enough people complaining about the same thing, I go, "Oh, I see a market for that. I see a need. Let's all get together and do something that solves for this problem." So like I was like, "Hey everyone, if the prides have stopped being virtual for us, let's make our own accessible virtual pride." And then we decided to do it in early July, which is Disability Pride Month, right? So it's still, like harkening back to Stonewall and the riots and like that energy and the energy of all prides, which is, this is an aesthetic, political, cultural intervention act where it's like, this is part ritual, this is part protest. There's some capitalism exchange going on, but like it's a thing healthy communities need.
What types of interactions you've had in your creations with dance and with movement in the past?
Okay, so I identify as a dancer. I've been dancing since I was a small person because my family is a family of people who just make art wherever they are, and it's always a talent show. I want to dance, but I can only do this right now. And so I'm going to be on my cell phone making art and then producing a little dance video. So I have those. I recently collaborated with a group called Zero Remake Return, and they were doing stuff with artificial intelligence. And so I experimented and I found out, can I make an artificial intelligent Claudia that like dances? And it's so wacky. I will share the video with you because it's my body is doing all kinds of wild things, but it was also how I engaged with that entire project. And and it was me, like I was in the studio with them, but I was never in the studio with them. I was always in a computer, being a box in the studio. And it was like, all right, let's find out, what is the dance of the box? Like, what is the choreography of Claudia's in a box and that box is moving in the room? So we did an entire encounter at Southern Oregon University last year. And it was very interesting being part of a dance experiment that was about artificial intelligence, where Claudia couldn't be there physically, and also for COVID cautious reasons. And then also Claudia couldn't really move her body well. How does that work? And then I just saw myself dancing with Petra Cuppers in the Planting Disabled Futures project. So I finally got to see it in real life, because Petra's touring it, and it's like a virtual reality where you put on a headset. And so Petra recorded me on a day where I wasn't too gimpy, where it's me dancing with like a tree limb and my walker, and then it's inside of the experience. So I've been a touring dancer for the past year in the only way I'm allowed to tour now. It's a digital instance, so Claudia, that is not connected to me, but other people get to experience it, and that's cool. We started off because generally all technology is unjust and built on harm and producing inaccessible outcomes for multiple populations. So we were already like, this is going to be evil, but let's figure out what's going on with it. So our first experiments were us just like being like, how ableist is it? How racist is it? How heterosexist is it? What are some of the dangers for us as a community? I'm 3 years now into this practice. Many of us are using, well, no, I'll say this. I have been using machine learning technology tools for assistive devices before a bunch of white dudes decided to call it AI and make money off of it. So I've also clocked how some of my access aids have gotten worse. Like they're not as good as they were because now they've become artificial intelligence to serve generalized and my some of my like there was a tool I used to use because my hands have been getting dumb for a decade, where I would talk into it and would put my words on paper, and talk to text has become a more complicated journey now, and that's annoying. And I blame capitalism. Um, I did a presentation on my own artificial intelligence artwork, and I framed it as cryptechnoscience, where I spelled tech TEK, traditional ecological knowledge. So if you'd like to listen to Claudia talk for an hour about AI, what my gigantic opinions about it, my entry points and stuff, that presentation's also accessible through the website. I mean, ultimately, this stuff isn't going anywhere. So it's always about figuring out where can you ethically engage, and also where can we information gather. So even if there's folks who are like, I'm boycotting for good reasons, I'm boycotting politically, we can also be like, okay, your boycott is making you ignorant about these things that might be sneaking AI into your practice. That's the other thing to keep in mind. Try avoiding artificial intelligence as an ethical participant, and it's going to be as difficult as avoiding capitalism because it's been integrated into systems that are part of your daily survival and engagement.
Left to right, Amal seated on a stool and Linda stands. They jump with arms up, feeling the energy of Claudia's virtual presence. Hand lowers to side as fingers type out new ways of existing in virtual and in-person spaces. Then torso and arms rise and fall facing left. They face front as left bent leg rises and releases with arms stretching to side. Arms ripple as outer leg fan kicks around. Linda jumps, while Amal's torso lowers and falls, highlighting variations in connection. Torso rises with bent arms up. They bring hands to raise right knee with left arm blowing in and out like Claudia casually stepping through an intersectional lens from their Montana home before they had a language to do so. Hands grab collarbones as elbows wade through the various understandings of their racial identity, their mother's disabled identity, and marginalized community members' coalition building. Different names, same deep impact. Dancers lower as hands drag across the floor and they slowly rise, carefully raising right knee again, as hands lower to foot and lower to ground, making strides in the coalition philosophy they learned that will carry them through adulthood. Arms wrap chest. They run in place. Like later in life, how Claudia felt performing high femininity led to career success was another form of drag as arms rise and lower with torso lowering. Grabbing whatever ideals of conformity they can to get their message out there in TV and theater spaces, left arm rises to side and flows. Right arm joins as it flows above, and they continue to balance through the demands of in-person spaces but the freedoms of virtual spaces. Right arm shoots up, then bends down as torso bends. Right hand, then right leg circles the ground.
finding space where identities can connect and thrive in theater and TV settings. Right leg circles up and over into a deep lunge, facing left. Arm reaching up, then across towards us, asking the audience and producers to demand better like Claudia's content. Linda sits. Both take their knee and open and close, like the doors opening and closing, accepting parts of Claudia and what they put on their screens and stages. Arms open and close to accept love from community during these trying times. Arms crossed at chest as Amal extends right then left arm behind, and Linda extends right then left leg behind while leaning on hands. Then lunging side to side as arms open. Thinking about the importance of supporting our disabled and queer communities and media, it reminds us of the bill to advocate for commission for our trans folks en masse. We deserve a commission led by trans folks and ensure healthcare, IDs, and more are handled in a just way. Our dancers reflect as Linda stands with hands rolling and Amal framing his face with his arms, daring to be seen by our legislature. We're embracing Claudia's energy to continue. Linda faces back as they both snake their right arm like an old Nokia phone game and kick up. Linda continues walking around Amal. Why are we thinking of these bills as separate and not interconnected? It's apparent in Claudia's art that we produced with access before they needed the accommodation. Building the ramp before you need it only guarantees your continued momentum later on. Dancers understand this as they open arms and legs to sweep the floor with new ways of art making, letting their internal drum drive as they switch feet back and forth in a lunge with arms pulsing in and out. Right hand grabs left elbow as it leads them to spin. They struggle to find the balance in these in-person spaces where certain identities are and are not welcomed. Hands alternate opening and closing as they wrap more vigorously as torso rises and lowers. Like the aggressive embrace when a space wants you for the identity but not for who you are and your work are. Dancers navigate those lines as they lunge and bring legs together to stand. Arms bend in at side. Not sure where to go, dancers gravitate towards each other. They hold hands as Linda highly kicks leg up and over. She stands behind Amal and lifts his arms, rotating him in the stool like how the World Wide Web retro icon would continually turn and connect us over IMs, emails, and more. Linda stretches into a lunge while holding Amal's hands. Linda slides to floor as Amal's arms are on a diagonal. Linda raises arms and torso to meet Amal's arms. Amal's arms lower to hold Linda's head. Linda hugs Amal. They continue interlocking arms like how interdependent care can show up in virtual and physical spaces. They release Linda lying on the ground and Amal seated facing her. They rotate outer limbs as Linda's foot rests on Amal's knee. Their torso bend to meet one another with arms grasping and releasing. Linda flexing her ab routine, continually meeting Amal like the different ways Claudia has continued work to reframe movement in digital spaces. From TikTok dances to AI that allows Claudia to expand their movement range, they emphasize a new frontier of using technology and dance as Linda stands, and they lean against one another, and her arms intertwine as right leg kicks, thinking of the taiko drums Claudia grew up with, thinking of how their artistic journey has taken them so many places virtually and in person. Amal stomps as Linda stomps foot forward, arms unentangled as Linda moves farther from Amal. Like the sounds of old dial-up connection originally connecting us to one another, the vibrations from Amal and Linda stomps keep them connected no matter the distance. Linda and Amal jump in place, casting their digital presence beyond what they can directly see and into the wider web, allowing for many to reach onto, learn, and continue innovating accessible art as arms flow side to side. Facing front with Linda diagonally in front of Amal, arm circles overhead and lowers with torso. Arms sway as torso rises. As Amal stretches legs and arms on the stool, Linda drops face down to the ground and extends arms and leg in a star shape, like the Langston Hughes poem Claudia listened to growing up, including about stars. Those poems represented hope in the midst of dark times. Claudia understands that hope comes when disabled community connects together, like when they created accessible virtual pride for our COVID-conscious folks who want to celebrate queerness safely. Facing outwards, dancers reach out and bend arms in, lowering and releasing torso as we combine ADV's access in person with mask mandates with live stream option for our virtual community near and far. Like Claudia, it takes just one person to start access but a whole community to uplift and maintain it. Facing in as they continue reaching up and down, both rise arms as Linda stands. Arms swing them to jump with right leg bent up twice. Linda pirouettes as Amal sweeps arms. Arms fling off anyone online or in person who dares that we don't deserve access online in theaters and TV and more, and we'll build it until then. Left then right hand brushes off shoulder as torso circles. Wrist cross as hands rotate and push out. Linda Arabesque. Hands rotate. Amal makes different shapes as he tries to see how much non-binariness can thrive from a binary code. Linda nudges elbows and moves across the floor, continuing to nudge the different expressions of how movement can be. Adaptive dance used to mean disabled, diverse bodies on stage. As Claudia has raised in the age of AI, how can that tech help expand the movement ranges of our virtual bodies? The field continues to grow as Linda reaches in the front left corner for more. Left hand taps right foot as it swings around to spin facing front. Hands and arms continue to differentiate between sharp and flowy movements as the movement swells. The energy and the peace will long continue beyond this time, in virtual time and in our minds as we continue to think of new frontiers of dance. Linda alternates lunging as arms open wide and closes, almost as if Amal's hands are typing out Linda's movements in a Sims-like moment stuck repeating. Linda's hands join typing as arms sway side to side, letting what comes out as beautiful vlogs, radical reposts, AI expansion of movement, and more be as artistic as words written on paper. Different mediums, same impact for creativity and change. Linda leaps across the floor, celebrating gliding through movement with community. Amal and Linda's wrist cross as fingers type. Linda takes a deep bend to the ground and stands, hands still trickling out words and commands for a more united movement. In the end, both dancers using the tools and movement ranges available to them to convey stories. Before technology as we know it today, that's what made us the most human. Humans, hearing creative stories and sharing them. Now we just have many mediums to do so. Linda faces Amal and kneels, not lost on us that he's been stationary this whole time, almost like those who've been stationary in their homes, waiting months for wheelchair repairs and engaging with community the only way they can, virtually. Amal isn't a wheelchair user, but Claudia is a mobility aid user, and others in ADB like them. Sometimes our live streams are just bombs to the very real isolation that can be felt in those times. Whether through access barriers or simple logistics barriers, we hope you can still feel connected with our work as if you were front row. As Linda and Amal's arms interconnect, we're reminded by the original hopes and dreams of virtual spaces, to connect no matter how far instantly. With visions of where access can be through online disability culture and radical reframing of existing tools, we hope to continue the work forward just as Claudia has continued the work forward in so many ways. Amal's and Linda's torsos lowering as Linda alternates lunging. The movement ongoing. We will now take a 5-minute intermission and be back soon. We will now resume our performance. Please find your seat. Thank you for the people who found their seats.
If Tom Wiggins wasn't black, blind, and enslaved, he'd be as revered as Mozart. Elise starts to the back right corner with crutches, alternate legs swiveling, resting on heel, pushing forward into a lunge, spinning, and repeating across the floor. This piece needs to be revisited as more history was uncovered. Flowing across this space, the power of TikTok, finding researched work by Dr. Geneva Southall, Black musicians uplifting Black musicians, as arms bend up. Culturally competent research matters because how else would we know if born today he'd be the blind Jean-Baptiste? As Elise changes levels from rolling on the ground to arms arcing across the space. She stands. She pirouettes, then spins across the space. Understanding the power to keep our histories is the genesis of this series, so that those who identify know they're not alone, and those who don't identify can understand our humanity. Unlike in Tom's time, when he was thrown in as a bargain when his enslaver bought his parents. Elise drops one crutch as fingers trickle and arms bend in and expand. His genius being shown by age 4, when playing with piano quickly turned to imitating sounds of nature and other songs on the piano. By age 8, he had his first public concert. He started touring as Elise moves across the space, sliding into a deep bend with arms arcing overhead and repeats. By 10, he impressed a famous piano manufacturer so much that he gave Tom an elaborately carved rosewood grand piano with a silver plate bearing the inscription, "A tribute to genius." His enslavers profited heavily from his labor. Elise slides into a lunge and pushes bent arms up and alternates feet. Feeling the strain of this constant work, Elise drops to the ground, feeling the weight of Tom's conservatorship trial between his mother and his enslaver after emancipation. Head reeling as legs bend in and stretch out. Artistically, his repertoire included many of the most technically and musically demanding works of Bach, Chopin, but without the freedom, Elise stretches and balances on one hand and draws back in. She repeats. He could perform difficult selections after one hearing, recite poetry in several languages, and duplicate lengthy oration by statesmen, but he couldn't be free. Elise starts to slide into lunges across the floor. The trial benefited his enslavers as they continued to tour him. His mother fought for him to be free until her death. Meanwhile, Tom found his solace and his suffering in his music. Elise grabs her crutches and starts to sway in a lunge as she slowly rises. The stemming of his autism misunderstood at the time. Elise crutches tap as she hops repeatedly. His talents and ways of existing in the world objectified. His enslaver cleared 3,000 monthly in 1887 or 104,277 in 2026 monthly. Even in middle age, she was touring in Boston in 1888 with the Globe heading, "There is but one blind Tom, there will never be another." Elise starts to spin and pause confused. She repeats in different directions. Unfortunately, without both positive racial and disability representations, Tom took on the racist stereotypes about his people throughout his life, thereby creating an inaccurate understanding about his own identity. He wasn't the completely positive representation of what we think of as someone to be honored, but the nuances necessary to understand his mindset and how collectively we've all embraced our racial and disabled identities as a community today. Arm and crutch rise as it bends into frame face and alternates. His last appearance took place in Boston when he was 56. Elise drops to the ground and stands on knees. He suffered what mostly was a stroke as his right side was paralyzed. He sobbed and repeated, "Tom's fingers won't play no more." Fingers trickling like the piano notes that would no longer be accessible to him. He died that night.
Tom's history deserves to be heard. Right hand flourishes in front of face to feel the wisdom of the ancestors. Left hand flourishes in front of face to feel the wisdom of our living community. Arms cross and recross over chest as we take the lessons from both to think of work as brilliant as Tom's to ignite our living community into action. Let's always honor these stories and learn from them for the next generation needing this representation and ours to know our power and continue to move the movement forward.
Abilities Dance Boston presents Cassandra Xavier.
My name is Cassandra Xavier. I live in Boston, and I I live life as someone with a combination of blindness and hearing loss from birth. And I identify as deafblind. She, her, hers. Always being surrounded by bassy music. When I was younger, I enjoyed sitting in between the large wooden speakers because I like the way the vibrations felt.
Love it. It does something when it kind of resonates through the body. It's a different.
Yes, yes. You would feel the music going through the ground, through your body, and if it's like bassy enough, you could feel it in your chest. Growing up in Boston and my experience, being Black in Boston, it's you could definitely feel the change when you're in another place. Boston, as many know, has a very staunch history of racism towards people of color, and it's never an ending experience. They may not tell you right away that they don't like you in that space, but you could feel it in the way that they treat you. And sometimes you'll have a very small portion of them that will come out and tell you straight out, like, hey, we don't like you, or we don't think that you belong here, or something. And you either stand your ground or you fall to the wayside where they feel like you belong. Unfortunately, I never satisfied them. I always powered through and I plowed through like a snowblower and just ran over them. I didn't care about how they felt. Is being your own self advocate. You have to be your own self advocate, and you always have to work 10 times harder than your own peers. So someone may not require a lot of effort to do something, but with my own things going on, I know that I'm going to always have to put in the additional effort for communication and understanding and just accessing information independently. I am very connected to my world with technology by all means necessary. Began to really dig deep into access to information independently about 12 years ago. I acquired a braille display. That was the starting point. Bluetooth hearing aid, the second step. That meant I can hear the phone calls so well that I would have to change my battery like every 2.5 days because I just kept talking so much on the phone. And I carry batteries with me because it would just be like everywhere you go, you're taking an old battery out, flicking it out, and putting a new one, and resuming the conversation. My video phone that I use Sorensen for sign language on the days that I don't want to use my hearing aids. And I have listening and speaking fatigue. Um, Braille displays, computers with um, speech activation like JAWS, screen reader software, and I like to alternate between Windows and Mac, like Apple products. So wherever I'm at, I still have a way of accessing what I want and what I need. I refuse to be stuck. Language situations. If I run into somebody that speaks Haitian Creole and they're having communication problems or barriers with someone who speaks sign language, it's like a brain Olympic in a way, brain Olympics to understand and speak Creole and then translate it into sign language, which I've done many, many times. So that's the best that I do at staying connected to my world with technology and face-to-face communication.
As you're mentioning, having these different things for different modalities is important so that you're not stuck.
Yeah, because I've been in that time in my life for many years where I was left in the dark. I felt I was one of the people that fell through the cracks from the system that clearly wasn't designed for someone like myself. And I had to climb my way out of that dark hole. And when I found one slither of an opening, I broke through and I grabbed everything I could to make up for all of the lost time and lost access. When I finally got access to all of what I needed, it was like an access gluttony, an access mukbang. I gorged on everything and more excessively, rightfully so. I made state agencies pay for me to go to training centers out of the state. I made them pay for a lot of things to make up for what they kept away from me. I made them pay for all of my sign language classes, 5 or 6 years of ASL classes, including interpreters, several hours of interpreting services. And that was the gluttony of access that I had. I was very greedy, rightfully so, until I felt satiated. And the first bit of advocacy was when I asked for an audible pedestrian signal to be put in place at a very dangerous intersection on uh, Good Enough Street in Brighton. And when they actually did it, I felt powerful. I felt like my voice was worth it. My voice was worth being heard. And I continued. And I often found myself sitting at the State House at events for people with disabilities, getting involved at different organizations. Now I serve on the executive board with the Boston Center for Independent Living and with the MBTA as well. Blind Ink was a different version of the Carroll Center times 10. You were there for about a year and you got to have a more in-depth experience. So it was the Carroll Center times 10. And I am so glad that I was able to fight with the Commission for the Blind to give me that experience that I deserved because now I live by myself independently and I can do a lot on my own and I have my own sense of independence for traveling to go to and from the grocery store or wherever I would need to go um, and communicating with people in public, not being afraid to ask for help if I need it, or better yet, using my meta glasses with Be My Eyes to locate things if I can't find a person. Um, the only barrier I have, well, the only two barriers I have is not being able to drive by myself and $1 billion. A lot of the things across my journey that have made me who I am is learning to be kind to myself and seeing through other people's experience as well as they're learning how to be kinder to themselves as well. Um, because I've also gone through a moment or a phase of, trying to become healthier physically. So at times it's okay to be selfish and draw back and pour into yourself at times because you need it. You have to take care of yourself. During, during my journey with my health and wellness and being kinder to myself, I discovered a running group in Boston called Achilles International Boston. They are an adaptive sports organization, and I would be considered a disabled athlete. And I've run a couple of races with the support of Achilles International Boston. And that has been an amazing boost to my confidence. And my guides and running mates are my other chosen family as well, my sporty family. Yeah.
Tell me, what does the feeling of running give you?
Running, as I realize, has absolutely quelled my anxiety significantly. Um, it feels good to achieve higher goals little by little. You're learning that you could run longer and take shorter breaks. It just feels great to cross that finish line or achieve that goal of like finishing a 5K in 45 minutes instead of a whole hour now. Oh, yeah, that feels good. You stick your feet into your Hoka sneakers and you already want to go run. I grew up in a very sedentary background, no athleticism, and this is the first year of really proving to myself that I can indeed do hard things. I want to see myself being, in a couple of years, I aspire to be continuing to be healthy with my athleticism, becoming a traveling storyteller that gets invited to other states and cities, and, doing something similar to TED Talks, um, seminars at colleges, like being a guest speaker at colleges and universities, um, paid opportunities, of course, and perhaps at times making an appearance on television shows if, the stories are compelling enough. And I think if I get to have all of that, I think I'd be set for life. Happy, happier.
All of that sounds like great extensions of things that you're already putting into motion. What types of
Yes.
things would you want to have at those TED Talks or seminars?
Basically, letting people know that if you're currently in a state in your life where you feel like you're all by yourself in a dark hole, that you are not by yourself, and many people have experienced it as well. And you too will find your way out, you know, just once you grab a hold of one little piece of resource, don't let it go. Hang on to it and expand on it in any way, shape, or form.
In a diagonal, Blake at the front, with crutches pounding the floor, sending vibrations for Izzy and Tori behind them to reverberate through their bodies. Each time Blake strikes the floor, the vibrations are felt through their feet like Cassandra feels the vibrations of house speakers in Miami or subway underneath her as she runs through Boston streets. Inspiring dancers to stay rooted in this journey as they deeply bend with arms bent up with right foot sliding across the floor,
until it rises. All lean back, embracing the sun. Foot lowers into a lunge. Right hand circles like Cassandra's cane, sweeping across the ground to light her path. Torso lowers like Cassandra, feeling the weight of inaccessibility, but rising still. Left hand circles, feeling the way through this journey. They jump like hopping over cracked sidewalks and run in place. Just because paths aren't made for her doesn't mean she won't still run in her own path. Body slinks to the ground. Arms rise and lower to the ground repeatedly, like feeling the vibrations in the ground. They settle to sit. One leg bent behind them, arms sweep across the space, feeling the racism and ableism entrenched in Boston's foundation. Like Cassandra, dancers break that foundation as they smack the floor. Harder and harder with each smack as we change the foundation of our city. Body waving like Cassandra sailing on the Charles, visualizing a better future we can't yet see. They rest on their backs with legs suspended in air, pedaling like the baby steps Cassandra made when starting her journey to run the Boston Marathon, a years-long journey she's dedicated to. And to have the ability to hear the crowd cheering her on with new hearing aids covered by insurance lifts the dancers to stand. Arms sweep over and around to leg as they struggle to walk in these inaccessible sidewalks. Snow coverage inhibits everyone's quality of life and the ability to independently roam, as is our right, rocking back and forth in place, feeling the tension build to advocate for better. They move across the space, legs and crutches sweeping the floor, like Cassandra sweeps the floor with any politician daring to combat her right to run and be free. Arms cross like an X on a ballot to vote for more accessible polling locations, so she can take her advocacy from the streets to the State House. Fist and crutches circle as we continue the fight ahead of us. Arms release as they jump. Torso and fist lean to the right as left leg rises. Blake resting leg on standing crutch. They rotate like a dancer in a jewelry box, but more realistic. They're released from that limited space and pause. Tori runs up and down as she embraces Cassandra's running spirit. Izzy sweeps across the ground, running side to side as they embrace how Cassandra connects to her surroundings through touch. Blake kicks forward and backwards like Cassandra, kicking against ableism, racism, and sexism in Boston, representing all of the different actions Cassandra must think about at once when you're a multiply marginalized person. Izzy rolls on the ground as Tori jumps with bent legs circling her in midair. Izzy and Tori connect as Izzy wraps around Tori's waist and leg and lifts their legs to the sky. They release as arms curve up and circle around. All dancers take this time to slowly move through space and embrace slowly navigating the tools needed to be independent in this city. Cassandra felt greedy until she felt satiated in the gluttony that access can provide. Dancers grind their feet on the floor against any misconception that we don't deserve everything accessible technology has to offer. Right leg repeatedly rises to left knee until they pirouette. Each dancer resumes moving to different directions across the floor, this time more intentional and guided as they have the tools to do so. Blake's crutches allow them to sway side to side, like Cassandra's cane moving side to side with more determination for accessible sidewalks. Right arm curves in as right knee rises. It opens to side and lowers as torso circles up and over, with left arm rising and falling to side. They jump in place, creating their own vibrations to add to the city's energy, sweeping across the floor as they clean up the debris that says we don't belong here, and making our paths accessible to everyone. They face back as arms open to side. They face front. Right leg and arm circle, balancing the strength it takes to keep pushing through ableism in Boston. Arm and leg extend to the side as they lean into a lunge. Arms and crutches cross and open behind them, with torso lowering. They repeat. Hands rise and float to their chest. Hands and knee open to the side. Hand and knee alternate, swaying side to side, like wading through the waters of inequity. Arms float with left foot to right knee, trying to stay afloat. But sometimes the water can take you under, like it metaphorically took Cassandra under. Tori and Izzy fall to their back and roll to stand as Blake circles crutches in the air. They rolled through their torsos for years. Cassandra felt in the dark without her accommodations, but when she snatched up everything she needed, she thrived. Even if it was pulling on teeth as dancers pull like they're tugging a rope and release to face front. Hands and crutches alternate, touching, shoulder, waist, hand, knee. They struggle to move through it as Blake wraps legs around crutches and other dancers bend over. Cassandra journeyed out of state and across the state for training she would need to keep active in Boston. It was difficult as seeing these dancers awkwardly move, but she did it. Dancers release as right leg rises with arms curved in. Not as fists, but as open arms, ready to receive all the city has to offer. They double pirouette in the thrill of moving through the city as they please. They take big steps, Blake taking big steps on crutches, as they greedily take up space in the best way. They fall to the ground as they find that reconnection with the vibrations in the city. Cassandra remembers the dark place she was in as she fell through the cracks in the system, but lets that guide her and others to more advocacy for a better Boston and a better community. Izzy and Tori fall to the ground, on their backs, with legs swaying. Blake sits with arms swaying side to side. Izzy and Tori rise to sit. They reach up to the sky with legs extended, knowing that even in a darker place there is always light ahead. Cassandra is that light for us and so many others. Let her be that light that drives you to advocate for better sidewalks and better accessibility in Boston and beyond.
Thank you all very much. Have a good rest of your evening.